All right, so, I was wearing a different shirt in the thumbnail, but, I'm still talking about the same thing. I just want to put that out there. But what's up, y'all? My name is Mack from Chicago, wedding photographer, editorial, events, portraits, and this is the Leica Q3. Now, I must say, this is not like a full, in-depth review. It's not. I'm not taking pictures of brick walls, and so that we can zoom into 500 and see like the texture of the bricks. I'm not like zooming into 300 to see how sharp it is on someone's skin so we can see the pores. But what I am doing, I'm going to give you my initial thoughts and experiences using this camera from two different standpoints. Number one, from a Leica Q2 owner, and also a non-Leica photographer and shooter. So one of the big pros about this camera, I must say, is the look and feel of it. Holding this camera, you really truly feel like you're holding a premium camera. And that's very important, especially because you've invested so much money. You want something that feels, pretty robust, pretty solid, and this doesn't disappoint. Now it does have a, like a nice firm weight to it. Nothing that's too heavy. And that's what I truly like about this camera. It's sleek, it's modern looking and feeling, and like most Leica cameras, it's minimalistic. It doesn't have too many things going on. There's no flaps for the camera where you would put the camera straps. The buttons are smooth. There's not too many buttons. And even the custom buttons on the back, they don't have letters or numbers or any kind of variations like that. And that's really good. And I really love this camera for that. It inspires you to want to pick it up and go shoot. And one of the things I really like is that holding the camera in your hand and really seeing it in person, the screen doesn't protrude out too much. It's not wobbly. It's really fixed on the camera very well and sturdy because it keeps the sleek modern feel of the camera. The second thing that you'll notice, especially if you've owned or you currently own a Leica Q2, is the button placement is different. I love it. I think it works a lot better. The shutter button is different. You actually now have the option to place to screw in a shutter button, which I think is pretty cool if that's something that you want to do. And then finally, a lot of people aren't talking about this, but the lens cap is actually screw on. So it's not like what we see regularly where you can just kind of push the cap on. It actually screws on, and that's something that I really, really like. I really enjoy, simply because there's been times that my lens cap has been bumped and has fallen off, but with this new mechanism that they have, the screw-on cap, I think it's really good. I think it protects this super expensive lens. And so, to be honest, the feel, the look, the entire experience with the camera is great. Now, one of the things that I absolutely love is the new upgraded autofocus. The autofocus is amazing. It's a hybrid autofocus, and it comes from the same sensor from the M11. Obviously, the Leica M11 does not have autofocus, but the sensor is great and the autofocus is phenomenal, especially in comparison to the Leica Q2, which I feel like the autofocus was complete trash. And if you own a Leica Q2 and you've been somewhat disappointed in the autofocus or you want it to be better, I have good news for you. The Leica Q3 is significantly better, and it captures movements well. You have a lot of different options in terms of what type of autofocus or what kind of focus mechanism you want the camera to act in, and it just delivered. And so I think that is something that you'll definitely enjoy. The next thing I want to say is the ISO performance is pretty good. Now, if we're comparing the ISO performance to the Leica Q3 with an Sony a7S III or a7 IV, you'll be disappointed for sure. However, it comes very close to being able to crank the ISO up in low light situations and still get usable footage. There weren't many times where I needed to just crank the ISO up because of the lighting conditions in which I was shooting in. However, I did notice that when I did raise the ISO, things were still clean, things were still usable. And that was phenomenal, and it definitely opened my eyes to just see how great this camera is with its new sensor and with low light. Another added bonus to this camera, and it's one that I honestly probably won't use all too much, at least right now, is its video capabilities. Now, it does shoot 8K 10-bit, which, you know, if you do video is great. However, the microphone options in here are non-existent, so you will be using the onboard microphone. Now, should Leica decide to do a firmware update and allow us to use a USB-C plug-in for our microphone jacks or something like that, cool. But even in that aspect, I simply want to use this for photography. The last great thing about this camera that I really love is just the lens, the image quality, the sheer image quality and the photos that come out of this camera. Now, there is a certain look that Leica cameras produce. It's like a certain level of contrast and color that is very beautiful and vibrant. And this camera does not disappoint at all. It follows that same tradition. Now, one of the things that really stands out is not the lens, because we've seen this lens before. It's the exact same lens as the Leica Q2. However, one of the things that stand out is the fact that when you're punching in the digital zoom of 35 or 50, because this is a 60 megapixel camera, it still upholds image quality. And that's important to me. You know, in how I shoot, I want to be able to punch in or zoom in or crop in, however you want to frame it, no pun intended, but that was pretty clever. Whatever you call it, I want to still uphold a certain level of image quality. And so I did do digital zooms at 35, at 50, and the image still looks great. Now, just to be clear, it's not as if you are taking this lens off and putting on a 35 1.7 and then a 50 1.7 when you do the digital zoom, because essentially it's just a crop. It is cropping to the same parameters that a 50 millimeter photo would be taken, but it's not adding that same compression. So if you decide to punch in to 90 on this camera, which you can do, you have to understand two things. Number one is the image quality is going to be significantly less sharp. It's not going to be as sharp because this is a 28 millimeter lens. I think it's remarkable that it allows you to do a digital zoom in camera to 90 millimeters, but you're not getting 90 millimeter compression. So the depth of field is not going to be the same. Just think of like a 28 millimeter picture and then just cropping all the way in. Now, I don't have the largest hands, but one of the things I don't particularly care for about this camera is just holding it for a long duration of time, such as a wedding day or long events, is that it does begin to be a little uncomfortable, especially around the pinky, around the ring finger and the thumb, because this is a very sleek and modern and stylish camera, and it looks beautiful, and it is. It is not the most comfortable because it does not have an adequate grip for someone with, you know, large hands, you know, slightly large hands. It's going to be uncomfortable after a while of holding it. Now, with that being said, obviously there are options for a grip. They're costly, for sure, but I think that will make the experience holding the camera just a little bit more comfortable. It's not a deal breaker for me personally, because I'm not, although I am doing a wedding day, let's be clear, I'm not really holding the camera all too much. Or maybe I am, but maybe I love the camera so much that it doesn't matter. I think that's it. Let's just go with that. So I must say that this camera is very expensive, and that is something I do not care for. Obviously, when you are buying or investing in this camera, you're not buying it because you believe that, you know, if you had a 28 millimeter lens on a Sony a7 IV, that this will outperform that setup. That's not true. This camera is not the fastest. This camera does not have the best autofocus. It does not have the best ISO or low light performance. Spec wise, is not better than a lot of cameras in this price range or even below it. There are cameras that are significantly cheaper than this one that will completely blow it out the water in most photography-based scenarios. So why do you buy this? You buy this camera because you want something to help inspire you, to make you feel good, and that can still produce great results. People don't buy Leicas because they want the best camera. They buy Leicas because they want a camera that makes them feel the best when they are shooting. It's based upon user experience, and everyone's experience is different. And so I think that if you are a Sony, Canon, Nikon, or Fuji owner, and you've never bought or have never held or have never experienced a Leica, I do believe that you should rent it. I believe that if the opportunity presents itself, I believe that you should rent this camera, test it out, or rent the Q2, test it out. And if you love the Q2, which I did, then you would absolutely love what the Q3 has to offer. I think like the minimalistic style of the camera, you'll enjoy shooting it, and it'll bring about a much more elevated experience of just taking photos. And to me, that's what's really important, and that's why people will buy a Leica. I think what this camera does best and what it does better than other cameras is it creates a minimalist experience that is both premium, both quality, and it's different, because there's not many cameras out that are like this, that produces the same type of image quality as this. And finally, one of the reasons why people will invest what they invest in Leica is because Leica cameras may not, again, blow the spec sheet out the water and just trump every other camera, but it really does inspire you to take photos. Being able to grab this camera and take photos, it inspires me every time I hit the shutter button. I want to take this camera almost everywhere I go, and in many cases, because it is, significantly smaller than other setups, it's doable without looking like a professional photographer with a big camera and interchangeable lenses. This keeps things simple, it inspires you, and what I think Leica does best is that it makes you feel good taking photos. So that's it. That's all I have for y'all for today. But listen, this was a long video. This was long, and I definitely appreciate you. If you made it this far, say that you made it through down in the comments below. Just put I made it through, because you're a real one, and I appreciate you for sticking it out and rocking with me for this long video. So if you like the video, please just go ahead and like the video, sub, and show some love to the channel. I got some great stuff coming up for y'all in the coming weeks. So stay tuned, and yeah, catch me on the next video.